A young mother disappears without a trace in Lake Oswego, Oregon. She's had a fight with her husband and walked out. She's missing, and so is the family car. Police suspect the husband. A local psychic's visions reveal there's been a murder. But will a partnership between the psychic and the cop put the killer behind bars? March 31st, 1986. The police in Lake Oswego, a wealthy suburb of Portland, Oregon, get a call from 28-year-old John Burke. He reports that after a late-night argument, his wife, Alexis, left in the family car. She hasn't been seen for 3 days. Local detective Robert Lee is assigned to the case.
At that point in time, we didn't really know for sure that a crime had even been committed. I mean, let's face it, couples split up. I mean, it happens every day. They have arguments. One or the other will take the family car and leave.
But that theory just doesn't fit this situation.
In this case, there was also a 1.5-year-old child that had Down syndrome, and it would be extremely unusual for any mother to leave her child. Alexis was a very beautiful woman. She was a person that would never stay gone for more than a few hours at a time.
Lee and his investigators suspect the husband is being less than truthful about what happened 3 days earlier.
John Burke was lying to me through his teeth. His reactions were real bad. His physiological responses did not match what he was saying. And my impression was that whatever happened to Alexis, John was responsible for it. And I went back and essentially knocked on the man's door to interview him. And I asked him if it was okay if the crime lab could take a look at the apartment. He said yes, and I signaled for the crime lab to come in, and we conducted our interview outside the apartment while the crime lab did their work on the inside.
They found nothing suspicious, so they focus on finding the car that John Burke claims Alexis drove off in.
We reasonably expected that if we found the car, we were going to find Alexis.
Driven by increasing concern and frustrated at the lack of progress in the investigation, Alexis's mother takes an unusual step. A family friend recommends she call psychic Lori McQuarrie. Over the phone, Lori immediately gets impressions about a very violent encounter.
The very first sense I got, even without a picture, just hearing Alexis's name, I felt that she was gone. I felt that very strongly. It's like a heaviness right in the middle of my chest. I described Alexis, her personality, which was a bit volatile, very intense. John, I thought, was lazy. I thought he was just a guy who was coasting through life, and he had absolutely no plans on changing anything.
John was essentially unemployable by anybody but his own father, because John's work habits were atrocious, to say the least. He didn't want to show up if he didn't feel like it.
I could see an argument between the husband and the wife.
Lori's view of the night Alexis disappeared matches with what John had been telling the police, but she sees more than the argument.
What I felt with Alexis and John and the argument that I envisioned was that it was in part about finances, and a lot of people fight about finances. That's usually part of a marital situation. But this was fueled by someone being on drugs, alcohol, and I certainly felt that Alexis hadn't been using it. In fact, one of the points that I made to her mom is I said, this woman turned her life around recently. And she said, yes, that was true. And I said, well, I don't think the husband had. And I thought that he was a very weak person and that he was still using drugs, and that in itself was creating a problem in the marriage. I felt that there had been a horrific fight and that it had happened right there in the house and that she was no longer in that area.
Within 4 days, police get a break. The family car has been abandoned in a rest area. Detective Lee finds it full of clues that just don't add up.
Alexis was 5 feet 1 inch tall and weighed approximately 115 pounds. She would have to be very close to the steering wheel to even reach the pedals. And yet the seat was pushed way to the back, like somebody my size or larger was actually driving the car. The ignition key was still in the ignition, and yet the doors were locked. From a police standpoint, that's what we call a proprietary interest in the car. Somebody might purposely leave the keys in, but he wants to lock the doors because he doesn't want somebody to take his car. There was an open map with a city in Washington that was circled. The fact that the map was there to begin with was disturbing because to us it felt like a setup right off the bat.
Although the car reveals unsettling information, Detective Lee knows he needs hard evidence a crime took place.
We did get a couple of dogs to search the entire rest area to see if there was perhaps a body that was around there, and came up with nothing.
Detective Lee's case has gone cold, so when he gets a call from Alexis's mother saying she's contacted a psychic, he's skeptical but willing to listen.
A police investigator really takes information, sometimes from oddball-type sources, and runs with that information just to see if that information is any good, if it can be corroborated, by another direction. I'm a left-brain thinker. I'm very good with things that I can see and touch, feel, that make reasonable sense to me. So I contacted her by phone, and I have to admit I probably was a little bit more flippant than I probably should have been.
I can remember that particular day, Detective Lee calling me and telling me that he was the detective working on the case, that he wanted to take me to lunch, and he wanted to check me out. It didn't sit well.
Detective Lee is anxious to hear what Laurie has to say and convinces her to meet him for lunch. Laurie just wants to help find Alexis's body for her family.
She told me an awful lot about my case.
I see numbers.
Laurie tells Detective Lee that she keeps seeing the number 15. He's intrigued. Alexis's car was found 15 miles from her home. Maybe that's the connection.
I watched his body language. He removed his glasses and put them on the table. And I thought, gotcha. You're interested.
Laurie has a flash of information about the car used to transport Alexis's body.
There's a larger car, older car, and as I'm almost looking at it, I'm back of it and I'm seeing the trunk lid open, and it's a huge trunk.
Detective Lee can't see the link. Alexis's car is a two-door with a small trunk, not the larger car Laurie's describing.
When you're talking about a car, a big car, spend the next 5 minutes driving the highway and you'll see 100 of them.
Laurie's next bit of info makes Lee even more skeptical.
She told me that the younger brother, Kelly, was involved. I had interviewed Kelly. Kelly was actually playing ball for the college that he attended in Southern California at the time of the disappearance of Alexis Burke.
I can see the brother handling her body, helping carry it. I can see shovels involved, and I can see this family connection.
We checked with the college. They verified the fact that Kelly was literally over 1,000 miles away at the time. That automatically made 8 or 10 of the other things that Laurie told me couldn't possibly be true simply because his involvement couldn't have been there.
Detective Lee's investigation contradicts many of Laurie's clues, but Laurie is sticking to her guns. If she's right, Lee could be missing some crucial evidence.
I remember telling him, it's going to be different than you think. It will bear me out. Wait and see.
Laurie decides on a dangerous path. She takes the investigation into her own hands and arranges to meet the man she believes to be the killer.
I just had to meet him.
Alexis Burke, a young mother from a suburb of Portland, appears to vanish into thin air. While police suspect her husband, John, they have no evidence a crime has been committed. Alexis's mother contacts psychic Laurie McQuarrie, hoping she'll be able to help police find her daughter. Laurie decides she has no time to waste. Alexis's husband is packing up the apartment, preparing to rent it out, so Laurie takes a risk.
I knew the minute I met him, looked in his eyes, maybe if I was even fortunate enough to shake hands with him, I would get a further impression.
The police found nothing when they searched the apartment. Now it's psychic Laurie's turn.
He answered the door. He was very laid back, and I don't know if he was on drugs or not, but he was just very calm. And of course, I pretended to be a renter. As I went through that apartment, of course, I think not just as a psychic, but I think just as another human being, I thought, where is the wife's picture? Is there nothing here? There was nothing, not a thing of hers there, nothing. And she had only been missing a couple of months, nothing.
Laurie's observations are chilling.
And I thought, how cold. You've already buried her, not only literally, but symbolically. She's gone from your life. When I turned to leave and thanked him, I shook his hands. And when I held his hand, I can just feel these around her neck. I know that's how he murdered her.
My reaction when Laurie told me that she'd gone to the apartment and met John was one of utter disbelief. Here was a person that even she thought was a murderer. And I was convinced of it at that point, and yet she's going up and making contact with him in an apartment. I was very upset.
After going to the apartment, that's when I began to get stronger and stronger feelings about where she was buried.
But I still was a basic skeptic. I believe what I can see, what I can prove.
Still, he's willing to listen. Can the psychic help Detective Lee find the body?
One iota, nothing of her belongings there. Once or twice a week, we would sit and hypothesize with each other about what I think happened here and what he thinks.
One of the things that Laurie had come up with right off the bat was 1-5. She didn't know whether the 1-5 meant Interstate 5, whether it was 1.5 miles, or what the significance of the 15 was. In this case, 15 could very easily have been, we're about 15 miles from the place where we thought the death had occurred.
And there was a place called Bell's Landing.
Bell's Landing, according to Laurie, was an important item as far as the relationship between John and Alexis was concerned.
Detective Lee and psychic Laurie McQuarrie didn't know if they were looking for an actual place or not. It was like searching for a needle in a haystack.
Maybe this is interesting.
Right down the way over here is where John and Alexis used to spend an awful lot of time. In Oregon, Bell's Landing could either be the side of a mountain where they park machinery when they're clear-cutting an area or doing a logging operation. It could also be a landing alongside of a river. And in this area of Oregon, we have some very, very large rivers, so it's quite plausible that there would be a landing named Bell's somewhere.
That's the frustrating part. Sometimes I get the clues, sometimes I get the symbologies, and it's up to me to make it fit. It's up to me to do the interpretation. And it isn't always like a teletype. I wish it were. We even went out on a couple of searches together in areas out as where she had lived previously, which is not very far from here. So he made the effort. He was at least cooperative and open. You know, it's part of what I saw, but I don't think this is the spot.
So you're not actually getting any...
I'm not getting any vibes, let's put it that way.
Laurie told very specifically that the body was buried.
Her head was just inches away from a little creek. I also felt that he had buried her where he could watch her.
That meant an awful lot to us, but what exactly did it mean? Did it mean he could keep an eye on it from work? Was it near his home?
And it was about that time that I was really talking to him about it's in a field, there's a building, but it's not a regular building like you would just walk in and do business in.
The more time they spend together, the more Detective Lee trusts Laurie's visions. They match his own hunches about the husband.
She has an insight into people and places and things that I don't even understand.
The scenario will play out. I will see the person, I will see the circumstances. Sometimes the reception may become a little hazy. It isn't always crystal clear. It may come in and out, but it's exactly like watching a television show. I could see him eating his lunch. He goes out there, eats his lunch, and watches the site. The site is within range. He can see it. And as long as it's not disturbed, he knows he's not in trouble.
It looks like John is going to get away with murder, but Laurie's psychic instincts tell her he's made a big mistake.
This was something where many people knew what had happened.
Laurie is convinced John has told someone about the murder. Detective Lee rethinks the investigation and decides on a new approach.
We used an awful lot of what we would consider to be behavioral analysis on John. We knew that if we applied pressure to John, that his past history would indicate that he would talk to somebody. And yet we didn't want to put so much pressure on him that he was going to invoke his rights per Miranda, which in the United States is a pretty big thing, simply because it meant that we were no longer able really to talk directly to John without the interference of an attorney.
I've always thought, you know, sometimes the best crimes in the world have been solved by the girlfriend who was dumped. And I knew that John had had a girlfriend.
Just as Laurie predicted, that's exactly what happened.
A former girlfriend of John Burke was living with some girls that were attending college, and she mentioned to one of the girls that she had a former boyfriend who had killed his wife. This girl contacted another girlfriend, who talked to another girlfriend about it, who talked to another girlfriend about it. The sixth girlfriend in line contacted her father. The father of this girl contacted the police department.
Based on the father's tip, police track down John's former girlfriend, Julie, and bring her to Portland. She agrees to cooperate, and they arrange to tape her phone conversations with John.
He said that he'd strangled his wife. Julie got the impression that the body was buried. We were driving by the metal fabrication plant where John and his younger brother worked. And Julie mentioned that John became very different every time that they went by that area.
But John's confession to his old girlfriend isn't enough. Police still need a body to get a conviction. Laurie sees Alexis buried somewhere where John can keep a close watch on her. It makes sense it would be close to where he worked. Following his own intuition and Laurie's clues, Detective Lee decides to search the 15 acres beside the plant. Maybe this is the clue 15 Laurie keeps seeing.
It has a very, very large metal fabrication building with very little in the way of vegetation. The 15 acres that was right next to it was ideal because the trees and the brush provided an awful lot of cover and concealment. Access was pretty much restricted. We sent cadaver dogs over the 15 acres, and their handlers came back with essentially nothing. I was personally disappointed that we were not able to find the body.
As Detective Lee and I would talk throughout the year occasionally about the case, of course, there would be times when he felt that maybe John was going to crack. And I would just always share with him my philosophy. Everything happens when it's supposed to.
It's a real low point in the investigation. Without Alexis's body, police can't charge John with murder. But Laurie is sure John's younger brother Kelly is involved, despite the fact he's given police what appears to be an airtight alibi.
I think Kelly just happened to be the wrong guy at the wrong time, and he was related to the murderer. And so he helped dispose of her body.
Kelly was in Southern California during the specific time frame that Alexis disappeared. And a reasonable person would believe that Kelly could not have had any involvement simply because of the time frames. He was literally over 1,000 miles away at the time.
I generally find what I get as a first impression is correct. And I remember telling him, I'm standing by it.
It's been a year since Alexis Burke went missing after an argument with her husband, John. With the case going cold and based on her track record, Detective Lee decides to listen to psychic Laurie McQuarrie and take another look at the brother's story.
John essentially has no friends of his own. His best friend in the world is his younger brother. If the younger brother knows anything about it, that would automatically mean that his best friend would know all about the case.
Kelly's friends and former roommates are all law students. They've been interviewed once about the disappearance of Alexis. This time, Detective Lee re-interviews them with a grand jury subpoena in his hand, threatening each with jail time if they refuse to cooperate. From what Kelly's friends have to say, it becomes very clear that Kelly knows something. He's brought in for questioning, and Detective Lee persuades him to cooperate.
He told me everything I wanted to know. Yes, he was in Southern California playing ball, but the game had gotten rained out. He was actually back in Oregon 24 hours earlier than he was supposed to be.
It is a turning point for the investigation. If it hadn't been for Laurie's conviction, police might never have re-interviewed the brother, and his information was just what they needed to get an arrest.
Bob Lee does not give compliments lightly, but he did kind of offer that up and say, well, I guess you were right. And I just felt that there was a shift at that point.
The deal we made with Kelly was very simple. We were concerned that because the body had been in the ground for so long that we would not be able to formally identify Alexis Burke. The dental records we had were several years old. We knew there were not going to be any fingerprints. There was not going to be anything that was actually going to tell us for certain that this was Alexis Burke and not somebody else. And that would be a loophole that a defense attorney would be able to drive a truck through. So we essentially made a deal with Kelly that we would not prosecute him in any way, shape, or form for his complete assistance in the case, including showing us where the body was.
I felt that there had been a horrific fight.
Kelly confirms Laurie's original vision of a strangulation. He tells Detective Lee how a family argument escalated into murder.
Alexis walked out the front door, slammed the door behind her. When she got to the car, she didn't have car keys, and she was in her nightgown. So she came back and started screaming at John.
He had big hands. I can just feel these around her neck. I know that's how he murdered her.
He came over to her and put his hands around her neck. John said to shut her up because she was really making a lot of noise. John says he ripped off the electrical cord and tied it around Alexis's neck just to make sure that she was dead. The body was rolled up in the carpet behind the couch for at least 36 hours. During that time frame, that at least 12 members of his family and her family were in the apartment.
When Kelly finally showed up, he helped John dispose of the body just as Laurie had envisioned.
There's a larger car, older car.
They put the body of Alexis into the back of their father's car, which was a very large Lincoln, dark in color. They then took the body out in the middle of the night and actually dug a hole about 75 yards from the corner of the building where they both worked and buried Alexis.
There's water involved and not a large body of water.
The body was right next to a very, very small rivulet of water. The head was the closest to that water, and it was only several feet away. And of course, the body was under just several inches of dirt.
Laurie's visions are accurate about all the important details of the case. The brothers' involvement, the larger car the body had been moved in, Alexis's body buried in a shallow grave near water, and about John keeping an eye on the site.
He was able to keep an eye on the situation because he went there every single day.
But John Burke still isn't in custody. Because he was out of town, he is oblivious to the discovery of the body.
As it was, John showed up the next day and he was totally in the dark, and by the time he found out about it, it was too late. And I told him he was under arrest for the murder of his wife, and I put on a pair of brand new handcuffs on him. That felt really good.
John Burke is convicted of his wife's murder and sentenced to 13 years in jail. His brother Kelly gets off scot-free because he cooperated with police. With this murder solved, Detective Bob Lee isn't quite as flippant about Laurie's psychic abilities.
I contacted Lori to tell her, all about the case and how terrifically accurate she was at that point on 28 of the 30 things that she had told me.
I don't know if I feel vindicated so much as I just feel, yes, this stuff does work. And it's important for me to be right, not just for me, but I think it's important for the victim.
Psychic Lori may be good at predicting the future, but not when it comes to herself. Detective Lee was so impressed with her abilities, he proposed marriage.
I never for a heartbeat thought when I met him that I was going to end up with him.
We've been married now for a little over 18 years. We're a good team.
May 1995. A woman disappears in Northern California. No one can find her. Then a psychic has a terrible vision.
I could feel her energy, absolutely frantic with fear. She knew she was going to be murdered.
For weeks, they search, but they can't find her.
She's in a ditch, water not far away.
Can the psychic lead police to her body so they can convict her cold-blooded killer? May 24th, 1995. The rural town of Dixon, Northern California. Martin Reese, a police officer from the nearby town of Davis, searches the streets for his ex-sister-in-law, Rosa Talamantes. A single mother of 7, Rosa went out for a beer the night before and didn't return home. With children to feed and get ready for school, this is not like her. She's a responsible mother. Her family are anxious.
My thought at that point was that she may have taken off, who knows, to spend the night somewhere and just didn't bother to tell the children. But somehow in the back of my mind, it didn't seem right.
To make matters worse, the night before, Rosa's eldest daughter, Elisa, had a terrifying premonition.
Around midnight, something in my stomach just pulled really hard, and I had a bad pain in my stomach. So the next morning, when I got to the house and found the kids alone, I asked them where my mother had went, and they said she had went to the store with Jose and never came back.
Jose Aniquez, Rosa's boyfriend, is an immigrant farm laborer. Their relationship is volatile. He helps feed her children, but he's also jealously possessive, and their arguments often flare into violence. Elisa goes straight out to the work camp where Jose lives. Maybe her mother had stayed the night with him, but neither of them are there. Frantic, Elisa goes to the police to report her mother missing.
When I got that pain in my stomach, I knew that she was dead. She wouldn't have stayed out that long with her kids at home. She'd never left them alone. Deep down inside, I knew she was really dead.
But without proof that her mother is dead, the police tell Elisa they must wait 24 hours before they can file a missing persons report. Detective Sergeant Elaine Perry was friendly with Rosa.
She and I, we developed a rapport and a good just communication between us. One day in passing, she had indicated to me that she was in a relationship, but the individual had a bad temper. And she had told him she didn't want to see him any longer. And she had been seeing another gentleman that had also lived here in town.
Rosa had already told Jose that she was going to leave him. And he had threatened her that if she left him, he would kill her.
My fear was that he may have beat her up
and just left her abandoned somewhere.
After combing the streets without finding her, Martin offers his services to the Dixon police. As a relative of Rosa's and a fellow police officer, he wants to do all he can to help. Feeling increasingly desperate, Elisa goes back out to look for her mother's boyfriend, Jose. And this time, she finds him, though she soon wishes she hadn't.
I asked him, where was my mother? And he said he had no idea where she was. That's when I told him that I had spoke with the police in town, if he could please follow me into town because they wanted to speak with him. So he followed me, and halfway down the road, he flashed the lights at me and told me to pull over. So I pulled over, and I could tell he was walking up to my vehicle, very antsy, like he wanted to strangle me or do something to me. But he noticed I had my little brother with me, so he just told me, just be a minute, I'm gonna have to return back to the camp, I forgot something. And I said, okay, because I didn't want to frustrate him more, so he went back and I drove into town.
Elisa rushes to the police station to tell them she's found Jose. They must catch him quick before he escapes. Jose had left the camp the night before, but he came back at dawn drunk.
It appears that he did return to the field because he wanted to get a paycheck. He made a statement to the coworker about sending a person to heaven.
Police arrest Jose as he's about to leave the camp. Being the last person to see Rosa, he's a prime suspect. They hold him on an outstanding drunk driving offense, which gives them time to find out what happened to Rosa. Martin helps Elaine interview Jose. He's cold and indifferent and claims he knows nothing of Rosa's disappearance.
His events were that they had bought some alcohol and they had been drinking and that they had taken a drive, and after that he brought her back and he has no idea where she went after that.
But Rosa's children have already told police that he didn't bring her back that evening. In Jose's car, police find a pair of Rosa's earrings, which apparently she never removed. They also find a shirt stained with blood, which Jose claims came from a nosebleed. Meanwhile, Martin begins searching the fields around Jose's work camp. But with such a vast area to cover, it's a fruitless exercise. Days go by. Rosa's family are desperate. Then a colleague of Martin's suggests he make a phone call, which gives the investigation a whole new focus. Psychic Sally Heading is a doctor of psychology and parapsychology. She's also done a lot of crime work with the police.
I'm good at finding bodies. I don't have to be there. In fact, I prefer not being there. It's easier for me to just do it with remote viewing. When someone dies, they're still there. They're just no longer in body. If energy is continuous, then there's no reason for me to go someplace to see something. I can do it just right where I am.
The normally skeptical Sergeant Martin Reese is willing to give it a try.
Hello, Sally. This is Martin. A lot of times, we may hamper ourselves by not considering every option available out there. And I have to remind myself, what is the focus here? Why am I going through this? Because I want to get resolution for the family, for the kids. So why not?
She had a very strong feeling that this man was capable of taking her life. When Martin gave me the first phone call, I started getting a very strong sense of what had happened to this woman. In fact, as I talked with Martin, I knew that she was dead.
Martin is shocked. The psychic has confirmed the family's worst fears. But how will he prove who killed Rosa? Rosa Talamantes has disappeared. Her boyfriend, Jose, is the last person to have seen her, but he insists he doesn't know where she is. The police lock him up on a drunk driving charge while they investigate. But after a week of searching for her, they find nothing. Her family fear the worst. Martin Reese, an out-of-town police officer and relative of Rosa's, is helping the police to try to find her. He contacts psychic Dr. Sally Heading, who confirms their worst fears.
She'd been murdered by her boyfriend.
Rosa's children tell police that the fateful evening began when Jose took Rosa out to buy some beer. But this trip to the store wasn't like others.
What was unusual about this particular time was that she went without the kids, because she always had one of the kids tied to her hand and the smallest one stuck on her hip. When one of the kids offered to go with them, apparently he said he didn't want anybody to go with him, just the two of them to go to the store. And that's what was unusual.
Sally believes it was Rosa who made the children stay behind.
She knew she was going to be murdered. If she brought her children along, they would be too. If she didn't go with him, he would murder her there and take her children too. They'd all be gone.
Under repeated questioning, Jose starts to change his story.
Jose stated that they had gone out to the camp and that there was a verbal argument, and she got angry at him and had jumped out of his car, and that he turned his car around and went looking for her but was unable to locate her. So he at that point went back to the camp and went to sleep for the evening.
But Sally's vision shows a frighteningly different sequence of events.
He wanted power and control over this woman. He sensed he was losing her. She was a piece of property to him, and he wasn't ready to let go of her. And if he wasn't going to have her, then no one else would. He took her to where he works the land, because that's where he's comfortable. It's a place where he feels in control.
And once out in the fields, Jose gives vent to his violent jealousy. Sally experiences the harrowing last moments of Rosa's life.
I had the sense of pain around my neck, of not being able to breathe. I had the sense of something burning me on my neck. The killing blow was at the neck and the chest that she bled out. That she was in a ditch on the side of the road, curled up in the fetal position.
During the initial conversation, Sally told me, Dad, we needed to go back and search at the place where Jose lived.
I knew she wasn't terribly far away from the ranch. I believe I said she was within 2 to 5 miles, something like that. There was a great sense of urgency on this case because of the concern about him taking off, concern about flight down to Mexico and not being able to apprehend him.
Just over 2 weeks after Rosa's disappearance, a massive search is made of the area surrounding Jose's work camp.
They brought out the mounted police, the canine. They had dogs that specialize in searching for bodies. They had people up in the sky. Just all the volunteers came together and searched the area.
When you're getting into our rural areas, there's miles and miles of roadways and acreage and ditches, drain ditches and ditches in fields, and the ground being constantly worked up, and that somewhat makes a search more difficult.
But even after such a huge effort, there is no sign of Rosa.
We were disheartened by it because, of course, being small agencies in this county, it is difficult to get everyone together like that. And our hope, again, was to find Rosa. We needed to give that family some closure, be it a positive closure or a negative closure. But those children needed to know where their mother was.
My brothers and sisters were scared, and they didn't really know what was going on. They weren't sure. They were also like in shock. They were in disbelief. They didn't want to believe that my mother was gone. The hardest part was waking up in the middle of the night with my little sister screaming and crying and trying to run around the house looking for my mother.
Unmoved, Jose offers the children no hope. He insists he's innocent. And without a body, there's no proof she's dead. He could be telling the truth.
There is always the possibility that what Jose was saying truly happened.
But the evidence is stacking up against him. Tests now show that Jose's blood is type B, and the blood on the shirt found in his car is type A, like Rosa's.
I would say that with the information that I had and the evidence, the shirt, the earrings, my thought was at that point that she was not alive.
Now, certain that Sally is right about Rosa's death, Martin calls her again. The psychic has had another revelation.
Of this guy.
She asked me if Jose was likely to use abusive language with her in Spanish, and I told her yes, he was Spanish speaker, because she kept hearing the word puta, something like that coming up.
He said, "You think he called her that? That means whore in Spanish." And I said, "No, I see it being written out. I'm being shown the letters. I'm convinced it's on a sign not far from where her body is." He said, "Well, there's the Puta Creek. That's it."
The Puta Creek happens to flow near Jose's labor camp. It covers a large area. Spurred on by Sally's vision, Martin spends days searching the surrounding fields and ditches.
You can see that it's just acres upon acres of different crops. And a lot of the grass that is left from the previous crops grows over the canals, over the drainage ditch, making it nearly impossible to look into them. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack. My mindset was now that if he buried her in a ditch or in a canal somewhere where he only knows, there's a possibility that the body may never be found. And so I was already starting to toy with that idea that perhaps the kids would never have resolution or find the peace and at least being able to give her a proper burial.
For the next 10 days, the searches continue throughout the locality, but there is still no sign of Rosa. Could the psychic be wrong?
I wasn't worried about being wrong. I was frustrated. I was frustrated that I wasn't being shown more as to where she was. For some reason, all I was able to be shown was that sign, a ditch, and water not far away, and I knew she wasn't far away from the ranch.
I really didn't stop to analyze, well, is she really telling me, good information? Should I believe her anymore? Not really. I don't think that really came to play. I think Sally at that point was one more resource that I needed to use.
As the search for Rosa's body enters its 4th week, her family do everything they can to keep up public interest in the case.
I was feeling confused and maybe not really believing that she was really gone. This really dear friend of mine started helping me. She put it in the paper, I think, on the news, that we needed volunteers for a search. And we had a lot of people help. And we went out and searched for her and see if we could find her somewhere out there in the fields. We looked everywhere, ditches and canals and everywhere, and we just could not find her.
Meanwhile, Jose bides his time in silence. If they don't find Rosa's body, once he's served his drunk driving conviction, he'll be free.
If you don't have the body, if you will, you're not going to be able to convince a jury that he killed her. He's going to have to be released. He'll flee the area. And as the focus and the interest in the case dissipates, that's it. And the children would be left with this unresolved loss of their mother.
But psychic Sally Heading is still working the case. And a new vision could easily destroy any hopes Jose has of getting away with murder. Rosa Talamantes has vanished. She's presumed dead. The scant evidence points to her boyfriend, Jose, who insists he's innocent. He's jailed on a drunk driving charge while the police search for her. But after nearly a month, even with clues provided by psychic Sally Heading, Rosa's body can't be found. Martin Reese, a police officer and relative of Rosa's, knows that without a body, the killer will go unpunished, and Rosa's children will be left with the unexplained disappearance of their mother.
I thought that, yeah, he would probably get away with it because where we weren't finding her body, nobody had found her yet, and time was just going by.
Then Sally gives Martin some alarming news.
Sally mentioned that this was not something that Jose had done alone. I also knew Rosa was a fighter, strong. You couldn't just walk up and overpower her. So either Jose got her very, very drunk to be able to overpower her, or had help.
Following this new lead, Martin goes out to interview Jose's co-workers. Sally warns him it could be a mistake.
Well, I felt very strongly that it would be a wild goose chase. They wouldn't talk to him, that this man was someone they were afraid of, someone they were intimidated by.
But when I spoke with Sally on the phone, she told me that they would literally stonewall me, that they would not be cooperative. She said one of them would be dark-complected and with tattoos on his arms.
I had the sense that he had a tattoo on his left forearm of Jesus, and that this man was going to be very disappointing to Martin. Like, how dare you come out here and ask us questions like this?
As Sally predicted, Jose's co-workers give nothing away. Soon afterwards, they disappear, leaving more questions unanswered. The search is losing momentum.
We began searching immediately after she went missing. And within days, of course, there was high publicity, a lot of interest, a lot of relatives and volunteers, friends of the family came together. But at some point, it was noticeable that the volunteers were not as many. Numbers were dwindling down.
The case was going cold. It can be somewhat depressing. We had these children who were grieving, and that to me was tugging at my heartstrings.
But Sally doesn't give up. She continues to focus on Rosa, hoping she might finally see a clue that will lead them to her body. Finally, Sally does see something new. It's an unexpected twist.
Sally told me that the body will not be found by the police, that somebody not official will find the body, or a passerby.
This is good news. If Rosa's body is found soon, her children will be able to bury their mother and see her killer behind bars. And if Jose did kill her, alone or with help, they must find Rosa's body within the year, or he will have served his drunk driving conviction and, like his friends, vanish. It's a race against time. Then, exactly a month from the day Rosa disappeared, a farm worker discovers her badly decomposed body in a drainage ditch near Putta Creek. Her throat has been cut, and she is lying in a fetal position, exactly as Sally described it. Can Rosa's body now provide the evidence needed to convict her killer? Police piece together the events of that tragic night. Rosa had been dating Jose for several months, but his violent jealousy made her want to end the relationship. She began seeing another man. Elisa believes he was the father of Rosa's youngest child. They had been together before Jose appeared.
He was jealous of my mother leaving him to go and be with my sister's father. And I think he wanted to get rid of either him, the baby's father, or do something to my mother.
When he pulled up, she knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that he was going to murder her. She began to beg for her life. Please, the children, please don't. And it just continued to escalate and continue to escalate. And his language became more violent and foul. And when she saw the knife, she began to pray because she knew she was dead. And I could feel her energy, absolutely frantic with fear. My children. Who is going to be there for my children?
When I found more information about the position and the location of the body, the fact that she was face down in a fetal position in a ditch, that the ditch had, at some point, had water in it, and that there was indication that her throat had been the point of injury, that matched up with the information that Sally had provided.
When they found her, I cried. I cried my eyes out. Because there's still a part of me that wanted to be wrong so she could still be alive. That would have been joyous to have been wrong about. Just joyous.
Rosa's body seals Jose's fate. Whether he acted alone or had help, no one will ever know. But forensic analysis puts him at the crime scene and proves it's Rosa's blood on his shirt. Jose is convicted of second-degree murder. His defense claims he'd been motivated by jealousy causing emotional distress. He was jailed for life and must serve 16 years before he can be considered for parole.